So now we have come to the time of an open discussion. So the floor is open for any questions to our speakers. And anyone? Would you like to come up here? Or shall we?
Thanks. I'm Julia Keikelame from the NCD unit at the MRC. I'd like to address my comment to Thabi, because I know they're doing an amazing job. The MRC are really good at mentoring students and getting them to get PhDs. But I think what you imply that we should get rid of all white supervisors and say that it's only for their own good is completely incorrect. Because I think a lot of us try our hardest to mentor black students and to get them to the level where they can also be supervisors. And so I don't think it's exclusionary. And I think the problem lies in science itself, because I think there's no money in science, there are no jobs in science. So I think a lot of students rather choose to take up other careers where it's more profitable rather than science. Because I've had funding, international funding, where I can employ PhD students and pay a decent wage. And we advertise and we get no applicants. And that's the saddest part, is that we're trying to promote science in these professions, but it's very difficult because there's not enough money. And although the NRF tries its hardest to support students, you can't live on 40,000 Rand a year and still pay your fees. And so you cannot do a degree like that. And the NRF pays sort of mid-year. So what do you do in the first few months before that? So those students from disadvantaged backgrounds, there's no one to pick up the slack in those first few months before they get their scholarship. So how are you actually going to do it? Whereas the MRC is far more efficient, you get more money, and there's far more mentorship, which I think is great. And the NRF maybe should focus their intention on less people, give them more money so they actually can finish. Because I've got a student now who's dropping out because he just can't afford it. And it's a disaster. So I think that's something we should focus on.
Person that is not looking like you in the context of today's discussion, and they do not buy into the vision and the agency that is inside of you, then you manage upwards, because you cannot expect them to understand everything about you. So unfortunately, we can't avoid those sorts of words in such a discussion, black and white. We have to talk about it. But it would be incorrect to say that white people should not mentor black people, because they're the ones that are having the skills to mentor right now. And that's what makes the urgency in those of us who have a PhD to give more than you thought you were going to give when you got the job, because you are probably doing a job for 5 people. So I'm sorry you misunderstood that. And then in respect of the funding, it is true there's just not enough money to go around. But then it still speaks to this thing that I mentioned, that once you do have that kind, however much you have, it's all about talking. There are supervisors that have come to my office who had funding from the NRF, and they had people who were from really, really dire circumstances. I'm talking about circumstances where the parents couldn't even afford the money to come, for instance, to the Western Cape or something. All it takes is for me to contact my counterpart at the NRF and say, let us agree to co-fund here. It's not a policy, but it can be done if you are going to do it openly and be willing to be audited on that. It's not an everyday thing, but there are those circumstances where we've overridden our own policies and co-funded, because otherwise this person just won't do school. And usually we do that at PhD level and postdoc level because that's what we are wanting. We're wanting these PhDs at the stage. And that's where we get this gap between us and the mentors, because you can't have a PhD until the person has a master's. But in terms of investing as a funder, we feel that the supervisor should try and get soft funding from somewhere, get the person ready for a PhD through a master's, and then we will take care of that person. I don't know whether I've answered most of your worry.
I think also with some of it slide, maybe I misinterpreted, that the supervisor is the only, benefits from it. And I think the supervisors are doing everything they can to promote the student rather than just put their name on the front of the paper.
That may be true, but the experiences of the students is what we need to go by. How do they experience the mentorship? And I think we can talk until... Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I also have a question for you, Sharon. Being at a traditionally or historically white university as a black person and moving through the various promotional opportunities and having that agenda that you speak of being there not just for yourself but also for others who you then become a role model for. I must say I struggle with the support for that person who happens to be historically now in their own department that person who is that role model. Because where is the support for that person to do that supporting? I do struggle with that. Because then you are one or two odd people in what can be a very alien environment for you, and you are having to be the mentor, the supervisor, the change agent, the transformer, and what hole are you looking into to support you to do that? The culture of the place that you've grown up in as an academic, you've got to be constantly thinking about that, thinking about how African is it, how do you make for change? And I'm not finding a lot of support for that. So I just wanted to ask you what you think about that.
Thank you for that. It's not an easy thing, because you yourself rely on somebody else to give you that space to be useful to other people. In a way, I would say I am fortunate at this time of the Medical Research Council because we have a president that has an ear to this question of transformation. But trust me, she is also under pressure from other quarters. But at least it opens that space where we can talk the same language and advance a little bit the agenda. But what I find works for me when I do get that, what should you call it, unfair rebuttal, because everybody thinks, oh, Thabi is just funding black people and doesn't want to fund white people, and that's not true. We actually have so much, the percentage of non-black people is still so much higher for the reasons that I gave you. That there's the question of qualification, they just qualify. But now we have to balance it in terms of, okay, how much money is there? Therefore, I go back to the statistics of the country and I feed people according to that. But what I find assists me to deal with that difficulty of looking like you are this just weird person is to stand in your truth. I find that if you speak the truth so that somebody hears from your mouth yesterday, today, and tomorrow, then they will realize that, oh, okay, there's not really an agenda here. This is the truth. I find that you still won't make too many friends, but at least you'll get that respect of saying, I think they are standing in their integrity. I think they are doing what most people should be doing, not just non-white people, also non-black people, because this is an agenda for South Africa. So that's what I find, that quietness of spirit of saying, I'll stand in my truth, I'll speak the truth, because I'm doing it for that person from KZN who went to school jumping over a river, but just happened to be smart, and they just need a chance. That's all they need, and they don't have a voice, and you are the voice. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind everyone, this is not a question and answer session, it's a discussion session. So we are here to discuss and not ask questions of Dr. Thabi. So her hand was up.
Okay. Thank you very much. This is just a comment just to say that in terms of publications, from my experience, I actually drove the way, the choice of the journals in which I wanted to publish, and I have been the first author in all my publications. And where I found that, no, but here, Leslie, I want my voice to be heard. I have had that opportunity to say I'm now going to be a single author here, because I was now talking about myself and my issues and everything, and acknowledged the support of my supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm Ranal Karalison from the Faculty of Education at Stellenbosch University. I think it's perhaps quite important to consider that we live in a world of metrics, of the way in which students are constructed, or as and doctoral and master students are constructed as outputs at the end of the day. And I think sometimes there's often contestation between and really difficult decisions that one has to make, particularly as a black woman in a institution, when the perception exists that black women and black people are going to be the mamas, the supporters, but also the people who are responsible for transformation. So, I mean, I've had the experience very often where some of my male colleagues and, across universities, and also white women, would then refer people to me to discuss issues that they consider to be issues about transformation, because of course I should know about it, because of what I look like. And then I think after a couple of years, I realized that this is not good, because I probably spend an enormous amount of time doing that support of students who are not my students and from whom I'm not going to benefit. So I think it's perhaps very important to look at how benefit and support is going to be mutually beneficial. And so after 16 years at Stellenbosch University, I now say to students, please go and consult your supervisor, because I cannot mentor you and mentor my formidable number of students as well. My own students get first preference. And so that sounds incredibly selfish, but sometimes one has to do that for self-preservation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Renee. I'm from UWC. Two things that I would like to raise or potentially get a conversation from Kopano Stanley. Can I call first name basis? I'm sorry, I'm going to just go there. One, earlier on when you started, you spoke about the whole issue around having a point of view. And what I find interesting is that most of the PhD have been taught a certain way. And you get into an institution where you have been in, by the way, I'm in nursing, where you have been in a department that has kind of like rules of how research should be done. Or you get, and then you move around like me being new in UWC at a point, and you have had some experiences, but you get into a fundamentally other institution that has a way of doing things. So by the time you start questioning to say, but how do you challenge people to have a point of view? If you are going to be saying this, that proposal should look like in terms of formatting, whatever, everything, even the thinking and language, how do we get our students to challenge those barriers? Because for me, I found them to be barriers that we are talking as researchers to say we need to be stimulating people who think out of the norm, who challenges. Example, one of the things that I used to get a lot is people would say, if a student is using, it's writing up whatever, they should use traditional questionnaires that has been used somewhere else. Most of the time, those questionnaires that are used are not even relevant to the context within which. But if a student say, no, I wouldn't want to use the questionnaires, I would rather like to adjust it, this, that, and test it for whatever, still people question, no, it's not how it's supposed to do. Whereas there are books that support that. How do we get to a point where we're saying to supervisors and at the same time saying to students, do not get tired, because supervisors are going to be lions when you challenge them sometimes. Do not get tired. Rather bring in the book and say, but this is what I read. Because for me, I find that as one big barrier on being unable to generate students to think, but we still wanting them to keep the same. This is how what Ford said in 2088, and we're still there in centuries later. That's the first thing. And I would really like to hear how my colleagues think on how do we get people to have a view. Secondly, just getting to the issue of outputs, support, and being a black in most cases for institutions that you kind of like feel, I'm not quite sure I'm in the right space or not. How did I think about this one? I wrote it. Intentionality. In an issue where you lowering your wings and to get people to push, because we are such a few number of people, but at the same time there is competing priorities. Outputs, you are expected to publish in a certain area. You are an expert in a certain area because we have initially. But now you are a nurse like me, which has 5 disciplines. I'm a community nurse by specialty, but I have been trained as a psych nurse and a midwife. So, but for me to be recognized by NRF and be rated, I need to only publish in community nursing related issues. How do I get this nurse who I know she's very intelligent, but she likes midwifery, for me to support this person to still be good and also me get the benefit, because I'm going to do that. Then when you guys rate me, you say you are all over the place. How do I get to, for me, those are the conflicts dilemmas that I deal with. So how do I get my people that I know are intelligent enough, but they are not in my field and they don't have supervisors, and I know they can do it, and still not feel that I haven't been productive for 5 years because I did not publish in the same things. I've supported people in different fields.
Thank you.
I'll try and keep it short. Chanel's from the MRC and Unisa. This conversation reminds me of a clip I heard on the radio earlier this week. Koketso Sechani had made, Professor Mamokgethi Phakeng's appointment had just been officially announced, and someone had sent him a message, the talk show host, saying, your reference to gender and to race, in other words, her being a woman and a black woman, is condescending. And he responded by saying, look here, I will not apologize. I will not apologize. And he was quite firm about that. I'm saying this because that resonated with me. I remember listening to that, and I was driving and I was going, Viva, yes, we will not apologize. Because I think this conversation is so critical. We can't have this conversation without talking about race and gender. I really appreciate what you said, and I understood what you said. And my appeal to our white colleagues is not to become defensive about it, talking about the inclusion of black students and black scholars, talking about privileging black supervisors, black students, the experiences of black students is I think it's important not to think about it along an inclusion-exclusion kind of binary. It's not helpful. Because what that does is that it makes us apologize, right? We step back, that's what you did. And we say, actually, no, that's not what we mean. So that's a strong appeal I have. I think it's really important that we listen to each other. And I'm hoping, just one other comment, I did say I was going to be brief. I found this session really interesting because there was a conversation about the micro context and the micro issues and then the more macro contexts and issues. And listening to the two of you, it was apparent that you have made decisions in your personal spaces and experiences and roles about what you were going to do the privileging that I'm talking about. Umesh, I know that you've made personal sacrifices. You talk about lowering your wings, your personal mandate, and I'm really hoping that this kind of conversation, and the more we have these conversations and agitate around these issues, will lead us to start pushing for the administrative or professional mandates and the, is that right, professional administrative mandates like the mandate of the MRC, to start saying something very, very different about who supervises, who gets supervised, and how we're going about dealing with the issue of matrics that Ronelle talked about. So Ronelle, it's such a catch-2 situation, that isn't it? Because on the one hand, those students are truly benefiting from the engagement and interaction with you. On the other hand, it's at a high cost. So we agree that there's something very wrong, and Kopano, I really appreciate that you have included this in your colloquium series, because we in our unit have been talking about what's wrong and what we can do to address the wrong, some of which we get right and some of which we get wrong a lot of the time. But I hope that we continue trying even if we're getting it wrong. Thank you.
I think that was a nice conclusion to this session. So thank you to all our speakers, and I'll hand over to Kopano now.